Welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to use the spin tool to make a screwdriver and some pipes. Let's get to spinning. First off, you can do File, New, General. And if it's your first time opening Blender today, go ahead and do General. And we do not need Suzanne, so delete Suzanne. And let's go ahead and save it. So do File, Save As, and we'll just call it Spin. So first off, let's bring in a reference image. I'm going to be using this screwdriver here, and you can download the large PNG or just download it below. So back in Blender, let's go to Front View. Make sure you're on your flexible design and do Shift A to add an image reference. And we've got Big Red Smile, a screwdriver, and it's going to come in really tiny. So let's go ahead and rename it, call it Reference Image. And let's scale it on up because it's really tiny. So let's change the size to maybe 200. There we go. Now we're talking. And it's at an angle, so we need to rotate it. So just hit R and rotate it until it looks very straight. And we've got this weird shadow because it's PNG. So just click on this transparency and that'll get it to go away. And what you want to do is just rotate it and make it as straight as you can. That looks pretty good. So I'm just looking at the grid behind here and the lines on the screwdriver. That looks pretty straight to me. And let's hit G and Z and just bring it up to the base, somewhere close to the bottom there. Hey, all right. So let's get to spinning. And if we look around, we can see we have the screwdriver floating here in our 3D print volume. And let's go ahead and make a screwdriver. And so to use the spin tool, we need some geometry. So let's do Shift A and just add a plane. So it's really small. We can do 20, that's fine. And here we go. We'll do period on the numpad to zoom in. So we've got this plane, but we're not going to use it. We just need a point. So let's rename it and we'll call it screwdriver, because we're going to turn this into a screwdriver with the spin tool. Now let's hit tab and go into edit mode and make sure you have all of your vertices selected on your plane here. If not, just hit A and then hit X and delete the vertices. So now we have the screwdriver kind of like a shell, but there's nothing in it. There's no geometry. So a cool trick you can do is draw your geometry. So go to 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and we're going to control right click. And as long as you're in point mode and you are in edit mode and inside of that plane with no geometry, you should be able to control right click and notice I can draw geometry. So go ahead and try that. And I'm just going to undo that while you try that. And we're just going to start right here at the center. One here. And then I'm going to draw one here. I just want you to draw a shape around the screwdriver. So again, just control right click. You could also extrude if you want to, but we can even G and Z, if you want to grab it. If you want that line to be extra straight, G and Z. And then control right click. And what we're doing is just making a profile of the screwdriver, because we're going to use the spin tool to wrap it around in 360 and create some imagery. So notice here, we could kind of go up at an angle, but technically, if this is a true profile, it should just be straight across, but the camera is kind of up at an angle. So for this, I'm just going to go straight across on this little line here on the grid, somewhere in there, maybe a little higher. That looks straight to me. And then we're going to draw one way up here. So control right click. Control right click and control right click. And the trick to this is to make sure that your starting and end point land on the center axis. So let's hit G and Z. And go into item and make sure that your X and Y are zeroed out. So let's just do 0 here. And that's going to straighten up this point right there. There we go. And I'm going to do G and Z and just kind of level it out just a little bit. And then we're going to do the same exact thing for the bottom here. Just to make sure they're completely even. So we'll do 0 for the X, 0 for the Y. And that's looking pretty good. So now if you do A to control all, notice we've got a profile of our screwdriver. And if you kind of get out of your front view, just kind of, orbit around, what we want to do is make sure you have everything selected. And we're going to scroll down and use the spin tool. It looks like a little pie. So click on that. And now you'll see this little line up here. You can do it in the Z axis. You can spin on the Y axis like that. Or you can spin on the X axis as well. Or you can hold shift and have all three at once. But for today, for the screwdriver, we just need the Z. And then you can also adjust your steps. I think it defaults at like 6. So let's just go ahead and spin it all around. And what's cool is you can hold control while you're doing this and get really precise. But we just want to go all the way around back to where we started and do 360. And notice we've got a spin tool right here. So we can still adjust that if we need to, or just type in 360 if you know the angle there. And make sure you have auto merge. That's going to merge these points together, kind of weld them together. And I want a little bit more geometry, so I'm going to crank the steps up to 12. And look what's happening to our geometry. We're getting a nice smooth screwdriver. And that is pretty much it. We've made a screwdriver just from the profile of an image. So there's one last thing we can do, and that is just go to the top up here. Go to the maybe 7 to go to the very, very top, and we can go to our selection tool. And I want you to just grab the top, hold shift, click the bottom, the right and the left, and then just scale these in. So I just hit S and just scale it in so it looks more like a screwdriver. So somewhere in that ballpark. And there we go. We've done it. We've made a simple screwdriver from just a line of geometry. We using points, and usually people do like vases or cups or things like this, but I figured since we're in the tools blender projects, let's make a tool. So here is a screwdriver made within a few seconds inside a blender. So now let's go ahead and prep it for 3D printing. So we'll do 3D print, check all, and it says we have some non-manifold edges and some intersecting faces. So let's just check that out. So let's see. I don't see the non-manifold edges. One thing I did notice with the spin tool is sometimes you just have to clean it up. So just hit A to select all, go to mesh, clean up, and merge by distance. And looky here, we got remove 22 vertices. So now let's check all. Hey, there we go. So that fixed it. It was just some geometry on top of itself. And let's look at non-flat faces, where that is. Just hit period on the numpad. Okay, so it's saying right here. So we're just going to go to cleanup and click distorted. Bloop, and that fixed it. So now we have a screwdriver. We can do check all. Hey, everything's zeroed out. That's the way we like it. And I'm actually going to 3D print this on the side here. So what I'm going to do is go into object mode, click on the screwdriver, rotate on the X 90 degrees, and let's go to top view. Maybe just drag it over here. And I may print it at an angle. So I'm going to rotate it on the Z 45 degrees. And let's just put that somewhere in here. And there we go. So we've got our screwdriver. We don't need that anymore. We can hide it. And we've got ourselves a cool screwdriver. Put on a little material for us. Hey, hey, looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and click on this and export for 3D printing. Just tell Blender where you want it to go. Make sure you have it named how you want and export. All right, and I'm in Prusa Slicer here. Let's go ahead and add our object. Generate some support materials. Maybe for the infill, we can do 10% and layer height, maybe like 0.2. And let's slice it up. And there we go. We've got a cool 3D printed screwdriver. And I'm laying it down sideways because it's going to be a lot stronger if we 3D print from side to side. Instead of if we printed this, standing up, then it would be way easier to break this skinny part of the screwdriver. So that's why I'm laying it down. And it gives it a lot more surface area at the bottom. That way it will stick better instead of just sticking at this tiny little spot right here. But you can do anything you like, whatever is best for your 3D printer. And let's go ahead and save it and print that thing. Welcome back to part 2 of the spin. So we just finished the screwdriver and I'm just going to keep it in the same project, the same Blender spin project. And what we can do is just turn that layer off and we can go back to our flexible design. And now I want to show you how to use the spin tool to make pipes or just do some cool stuff with it. So let's go to Shift A and let's add a cylinder. And 32 vertices is fine. Maybe let's crank it up, maybe like 64 just to make it smoother. Radius, we can do 10. So that'll be 20 millimeters across for the diameter. And for the depth, let's do like 10. And there we go. So now we've got this little piece of pipe, if you will. So let's go into edit mode. And what we can do is highlight just one of the faces. And actually, let's go to our front view. And for this, to make the pipes, let's do some snapping. So it's kind of makes it a little easier. So turn on your snapping right here. And you want to make sure you have increment, absolute grid snap. And I'm going to turn off this background just so we can kind of see our grid here. And let's bring our pipe up one Blender unit. These little squares here, if you zoom out, that's one Blender unit. So let's just hit A to select all and hit G. And notice since we turned on our snapping, it kind of like snaps every little millimeter essentially. So let's put it right there on the floor, and I moved it over one, but let's just go straight up and land it right on the floor. And now what we can do is take our 3D cursor tool and kind of click around and snap it to the grid. So we're just going to go over one Blender unit. You can kind of see this square right here, this one right here, and just snap it right there. So you want to make sure it's right in the middle. And the 3D cursor is going to be very important for the spin tool. So watch what you can do. Go ahead and click. Oh, so I accidentally moved the 3D cursor. So let's put it back right here. Just snap it there. Go back to your selection mode and select the face. And now let's do spin tool. So check this out. If you do spin tool, notice that the spin tool is kind of playing off of the 3D cursor. So we're kind of like setting an anchor point, essentially. Go to our front view again with 1. And we want to add X and Y. So just hold Shift and click on these. Notice if we click on the Y here and click and drag, hey, we're getting some cool pipes here. And if I hold Control, it will snap incrementally. So there we go. Boop. And so that's 180. And then down here with the little box right here, we can twiddle that up and increase the segment. So maybe like 12, get a nice smooth curve right there. And then we can just hit E to extrude. And there we go. So we've made a really cool pipe just like that within a few seconds. And it's all based off of the 3D cursor. So let's keep going. Let's go to front view. And we still have our face selected right here. So let's just hit E and extrude it out as far as you want. I'm going to go to front view. And I went a little too far. I want to put it right on this little grid here. So right there. Yeah, so notice how it's snapping right here. So I'm going to lock it right there. And then I'm going to do shift right click. And you can move your 3D cursor with just shift and right click. So it's locking right there. And then we can click and drag, hold control. There we go. Increase our steps. And we can even make our default right here. So let's confirm that. So select your face, maybe extrude just a little bit. Go to front view, grab that. Maybe we'll just do a half. And then shift right click to move your cursor right here. And you could go even further, if I wanted it over here. And then click and drag that. It's going to be way further. So really just, play around with this. It's pretty fun. You could even do a 90, if you want to do that. Increase the steps to 12. And then here we could increase our default to 12. And then, hit E to extrude. Move our 3D cursor with shift right click. Click and extrude that. Hold control. E to extrude. We can shift right click to move our mouse. Click and drag. Hold control. So you can already see the power of this pretty quickly. So we've made some pretty crazy looking pipes pretty fast and very easily. But what we need to do now is kind of turn these into actual pipes. Right now they're just like tubing, or they're just like weird cylinders that are stretched all over the place. But what you can do is select the caps here and hit X to delete the faces. And now we've got this open geometry. And so it's not 3D printable, but what we can do is add a simple modifier, which we used before, which is solidify. So click on solidify right here and then type in your millimeters. And it's going to do inward since it's -1. So just type in maybe like 2. And there we go. We've got some pipage. So turn that off. Looky there, right there. And you can control that, however much you want. You could do 0, and that's going to go from the original geometry and go in both directions. So if it was at 2, then it'd be 1 millimeter in, 1 millimeter out, or you could do 1, and that's from the original geometry out 2 millimeters. So pretty powerful stuff here. Let's go ahead and maybe let's rotate it. So I'm going to go into object mode, rotate on the X 90 degrees, just kind of lay it on down, move it over here. And let's get it ready for 3D printing. So we'll go to, make sure you have your object selected, hit tab to go into edit mode. We can do W to get our selection tool. And let's check all. So it says we have non-manifold edges, and that's just our original geometry here. So that's okay. Once it exports for 3D printing, it's going to apply the solidify modifier, and everything will be good. So let's go ahead and rename it. Call it pipes or pipe. Tell Blender where we want. That's good. And export. So I'm going to turn on my background, go into Eevee view, and turn on our screwdriver. And there we go. We've got a pipe and a screwdriver made from the same tool. So it just shows you the versatility of the spin tool and how powerful it can really be. So let's go ahead and get them ready for printing. So I'm going to go right back into Prusa Slicer. Let's get rid of this object and bring in our pipe. And there it is. Go ahead and slice it up. And we've got a lot of infill inside of here. And that is definitely what we don't want. Since this is a sphere, we've got our Thoi theory. We don't need all those supports. So let's just go to print settings, do our support material, and turn off auto-generated supports, and maybe do just like the first 25 layers. That should be fine. And slice it up. There we go. So now we're going to get some nice support on the outside, but it's going to stay nice and empty on the inside. And you can even, cut these in half and have like a little marble runway or do a bunch of cool stuff with it. So get super creative with the spin tool. I think your mind's probably already coming up with some ideas to make some really cool stuff. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and print that thing.